Hey everyone, it's a ticket to Christ. Thank you for tuning back in. We've been focused this week on the spirituality of justice. A lot of times we don't think about that as an aspect, a quality of who God is, right? And of course, we know that God poured out his own wrath on Jesus and brought about justice, vindicated his own name for himself. And so we know that justice is important. It's an important part of spirituality, of righteousness. We also see through different scriptures that when there's an injustice in the land, that a judgment can come on the land because of it. It can really impact people. It's a spiritual wrench that happens, a spiritual gap, right? So in order for spiritual healing to happen, justice has to prevail. That's another trend I see happening. Another one that I see as well is that God has a timing for everything. So he is going to bring about justice in the right time. And then lastly, I see that there's a thin line between justice and vengeance. God sees we need justice, and justice a lot of times comes, you need to be avenged. And that then falls in the jurisdiction of God, right? And so there's a thin line between it. And a lot of times when I'm reading, I'm seeing that the person who was wronged isn't in a position to get justice. They have to rely on the heart of someone else, their fear of God, or that person's integrity, right? That God always sends someone. And so we're looking in Luke chapter 18 here today to focus on this particular account, because there's some spiritual principles here as well. It says, "And he spake a parable unto them to this end, that men ought always to pray and not to faint, saying, There was in a city a judge, which feared not God, neither regarded man. And there was a widow in that city, and she came unto him, saying, Avenge me of mine adversary. And he would not for a while, but afterward he said within himself, Though I fear not man, though I fear not God, nor regard man, yet because this widow troubleth me, I will avenge her, lest by her continual coming she weary me. And the Lord said, Hear what the unjust judge saith. And shall not God avenge his own elect, which cry day and night unto him, though he bear long with them? I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man cometh, shall he find faith on the earth?" All right, we can pause there. I always wondered why he said verse 8, like why would he pair that up with this account? And so it came to me, I believe from the Lord, that because he's talking here about avenging his own elect, which cry out day and night unto him. He's talking about the blood that was shed by the elect. If you look at Revelation 6, when the fifth seal is opened, you see under the altar were the saints who had been martyred because of the word of God. And it said that their blood was crying out, and it was crying out day and night. And God is bearing up with them that outcry for justice. So verse 7, he bears along with them. But Jesus is saying, when I come back, are there going to be people who are going to have the level of faith they had, whereby they laid down their lives for the gospel? Are there going to be people with that type of faith that require judgment and to be avenged? And in looking around him, that was a question that he asked then. So that's what I get from that. Do we live the type of righteous life whereby it requires God's justice, that God has to come and avenge us because we're living so righteously and we're having the faith a lot that God is just and is not going to let anybody get away with anything? A lot of times people take things into their own hands when they don't feel that they're going to get any justice, because they don't believe that God is going to vindicate them, because it's not taking quick enough for them, right? And we see the Lord giving an example here of why we should understand that God will avenge his own. And it's this woman, she's a widow. So a widow in those days, if you're a widow, you're really vulnerable, right? Today it's different, because the society in the West is structured differently. But in that society, a widow didn't have defense. So she was extremely vulnerable, and relied on God. So she didn't have her own income. She was reliant on family. And apparently someone did something to her. And so she went to this judge. And he was not a just judge. He wasn't a man of integrity. But because of her persistence, right? Because he felt like, okay, this is going to eventually fall back on me, he brought about the justice that she needed. And Jesus is saying, look, if this man with no integrity eventually gives this woman justice, what to say about God, who is good, who hears us, right? And who bears up with us, right? When we go through integrity, God is feeling it alongside with us. Verse 7, he says, they cry out day and night, and he bear long with them. So as it doesn't, it doesn't leave God unaffected as they're crying out. He's being long suffering with them. It's sort of like when your child hurts, you hurt with them, right? You suffer with them, you grieve with them, you feel their pain. So it's a kind of a poor analogy, but the closest I can think of. And so, beloved, justice is important, and there's a spiritual principle behind it that is important. And without justice, there is, what my understanding is, something happens negatively in the spiritual realm. So it's important to not only be just, but if it's in your position to bring about the justice of someone else, you do so, but you do so with wisdom and integrity, right? So we see as well that God always does it with wisdom, with integrity, and with mercy. God's justice always comes with mercy, and it comes with wisdom and good judgment. So it's not just this rash, willy-nilly, one-sided, hypocritical thing. It's being fair, right? So that is it from me, beloved. We'll pick it up again tomorrow. Have a great day.